are brown, leaves are brown, and the sky is gray.
Hollywood thought it had seen it all, until Michelle Phillips revealed a secret that silenced the world. The real father of legendary Cass Elliott's daughter, Mama Cass. A secret that Cass took to the grave, seemingly buried forever, until one day Michelle accidentally touched it and said, "It was like a bomb went off in my heart." But what makes people shiver is not just that secret. It is the chain of emotional tragedies, addictions, love, and dangerous relationships that turned Michelle from a musical angel into a woman haunted by her own melodies and songs. Don't take your eyes off the screen if you want to know the truth about the identity of Mama Cass's daughter's biological father. As one of the most iconic faces of the 1960s folk group, the Mamas and the Papas, Michelle Phillips has seen, and is no stranger to, the conflicts and spectacular collapses that have rocked the history of rock music. In fact, despite her angelic face, she has often been at the center of trouble. Michelle has never had a normal life, and it all started when she was just 5 years old. That fateful year, her mother died suddenly of a brain aneurysm, leaving her and her sister in an empty house. Her father, Gil, a bohemian artist, tried to fill the void with brief affairs and alcohol. For Michelle, her earliest memories are of the sound of guitars mixed with the laughter of strange women, and that vague sound instilled in her the belief that the adult world was both alluring and dangerous. Every night, behind her closed bedroom door, Michelle heard sounds that disturbed and confused her young soul. It was then that she learned an important lesson. The adult world was chaotic and dangerous, and if she wanted to survive, she had to be strong. When her father taught her to sing, Michelle sensed something bigger than music, a small but fierce fire that promised to lift her out of her loneliness. But she didn't know that the fire would also burn her entire life. At 13, Michelle met Tamar Hodel, a girl a few years older, rebellious, mysterious, and dangerous to the point of attraction. Tamar was the daughter of Dr. George Hodel, suspected of involvement in the infamous Black Dahlia case, a name that made Los Angeles shudder. But Michelle wasn't afraid. On the contrary, she saw in Tamar something she had never had: freedom. Tamar taught her how to break the rules, how to try drugs, how to use fake IDs to get into the smoky bars where the new bands were redefining the sound of the era. They roamed the streets of Hollywood, immersed in the vibrant sounds of the 60s, as if the music could wash away all the loneliness in their hearts. In 1961, not yet 17, Michelle left Los Angeles with Tamar for San Francisco. Amidst the wave of folk music and protest, it was there that she met John Phillips, the charismatic leader of the famous folk group The Journeymen. John was the man who would make her a legend, then crush her heart with his own hands. John was 25 at the time, married to high-class dancer Susan Adams. But for Michelle, it was love at first sight. She grew up in a liberal family that never taught her the meaning of boundaries. One afternoon, she walked to John's house, knocked on the door, and when the woman opened it, Michelle simply said, "I love your husband." Susan Adams, unsurprised, just smiled wearily and said that her husband had mistresses everywhere. Michelle was just the latest one. But Susan had no idea that this time would be different. John, a man known for being a womanizer, was actually madly in love with Michelle. John later wrote in his memoirs, "It was as if she had stepped out of a dream and into my life." In 1962, John divorced Susan. A few months later, he and Michelle married in New York, beginning a romantic relationship. John Phillips was a musical genius with an uncanny ability to sense trends before they happened. He could sit in a bar, hear a random comment, and turn it into a timeless lyric. But to those who worked with him, John was also a master manipulator, knowing how to seduce, persuade, and manipulate people to get what he wanted. In music, he experimented endlessly, from sweet doo-wop to soft ballads. But no matter how many styles John changed, there was one thing he never compromised: control. He wanted to be in control of it all: the song, the band, the audience, and especially Michelle, his young wife, who was both beautiful and stunning, the pride of his life. Michelle was signed to a teen modeling contract at the time, ready to enter the glamorous world of fashion. But John wouldn't let her. He forced her to give it all up, pulled her into his orbit, trained her in singing, put her in his band, and kept her by his side like a shadow. "You don't need to be a model," John said. "You'll sing? You'll live in my music?" Even before the group officially formed, John wanted to control everything, from their music to their image, and even Michelle's private life. On tour, he required her to stay in a supervised dormitory, never leaving his sight for a second. However, John's talent was undeniable. He had an uncanny ability to find inspiration anywhere, even on nights wandering around the city while high on drugs. One such night, drifting in the fog and flickering streetlights, the first strains of the California Dream rushed through his mind. The next morning, John woke Michelle up, begging her to help him finish the lyrics. The song quickly became one of the most iconic anthems of the 1960s, and soon a legendary band was born. Around this time, John met Denny Doherty, a tenor with a fragile troubadour-like appearance. Then came Cass Elliot, a woman with a voice unlike any other. The four of them formed the Mamas and the Papas. But even before the band was officially formed, cracks began to appear. It was no surprise that John was still obsessed with controlling Michelle in their marriage. However, what shocked John was Michelle's reaction. Instead of submitting, she began to rebel. Amidst the tense power struggle, Michelle unexpectedly finds what she thinks is an escape when she meets Russ Titleman, her sister's new boyfriend. At first, their conversations are casual, but their brief encounters quickly turn into a heated secret. Although both are already in relationships, they quickly fall madly in love and begin an affair. For once, Michelle is not the one being controlled. She is the one breaking the rules, the one cheating in a marriage that seemed unshakable. For John, this is unforgivable. Furious, he calls Russ, his voice cold as steel. "You know, there could be another guy waiting outside your door with a shotgun." The threat seems a bit exaggerated, but everyone knows John is not joking. And in a cruel twist, while John has cheated countless times, this time he is the one being betrayed. Frightened, Russ abruptly ended the affair, leaving Michelle standing there, cold, without remorse. For her, love and betrayal were two sides of the same coin. She grew up in a family where adultery was commonplace. Her father had countless affairs, and for Michelle, lust was never something to be ashamed of. But for John Phillips, that indifference was like a knife to the heart. In his pain, he turned his bitterness into music, writing "Go Where You Want to Go," a sarcastic, heartbreaking laugh addressed to the woman he once loved. But the tragedy did not stop there. In 1965, the Mamas and the Papas reached the height of their fame with "California Dreamin'," resounding across America. They appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, partied all night, argued all day. If Michelle's affair with Russ was just a small crack in the Phillips family, her next lover threatened to bring the whole house down. Denny Doherty, her bandmate, a gentle and fragile tenor. After countless rehearsals with unspoken tension, Michelle and Denny could not resist each other. When John found out, his first instinct was the familiar instinct, turning the pain into music. He wrote the song "I Met Her Again" as a way to soothe his broken heart. But this time, the wound could not heal so easily. Tensions escalated until John and Michelle decided to part ways. John quickly found someone new, a high-class woman and Marshall, while Michelle, nursing a wounded ego, secretly began dating Gene Clark, a musician from the land of the birds. It was supposed to be a secret, but John refused to keep it a secret any longer. One night, he showed up at a Mamas and the Papas show in a bright red shirt, sitting in the front row as if to stake his claim. Michelle saw him and was suddenly filled with confidence, singing as if every note and every eye was for John, while John watched silently from the wings. For Michelle, it was a moment of triumph. For John, who had nearly reached his limit with her series of relationships, the public humiliation was too much to bear. After the show, he kicked her out of the band. When Michelle turned to the other members for support, they sided with John. She was promptly kicked out of the very band she had helped create. But Michelle, with her angelic face, had no intention of leaving quietly. She was furious at being kicked out, and things got worse when the band decided to replace her with Jill Gibson, the girlfriend of producer Lou Adler. That's when Michelle realized they were serious. She fought back by storming into a Mamas and the Papas recording session, screaming that she would bury them all. When Denny Doherty refused to defend her, she even tried to hit him. The Mamas and the Papas were a band steeped in chaos. And despite Michelle's outburst that day, they eventually let her back in. For a brief moment after the reunion, it seemed like things had finally settled down for Michelle. The Mamas and the Papas wrote one of the most brilliant chapters of the 1960s, performing at the Monterey Pop Festival alongside future legends like Jimi Hendrix, and turning the song San Francisco into an anthem for a generation yearning for freedom in the age of Aquarius. With success pouring in, Michelle and John used their earnings to buy a luxury villa in Bear, which quickly became a hotspot for rock and movie stars, with parties lasting until dawn. Amid the whirlwind of glamour, Michelle discovered she was pregnant. Soon after, their daughter, China Phillips, was born, the couple's only child. But behind the gilded doors and the compliments was a dark, oppressive world. John not only did not let Michelle go, but also tightened his grip more than ever. Cass Elliott's sister once recalled the feeling of entering the Bear mansion. "I did not feel comfortable in that house. The house was gloomy, and so was the atmosphere around John." Tamar Hodel also said that one time she visited Michelle, John did not let her leave the room as if he was keeping his wife under house arrest. Michelle never revealed everything that happened in that house, both before and after she gave birth. But what she shared was enough to make people shudder. She said that John once brutally assaulted her to the point of being hospitalized. That was when Michelle realized she could not bear it anymore. In 1968, when China Cha was still a newborn, she made the most painful decision of her life: divorce John Phillips and end the marriage that had become a nightmare. Without Michelle around, John quickly spiraled out of control. Although the group were no strangers to drug-fueled parties, John was the most self-destructive. He became increasingly abusive towards Deloed, with his new girlfriend, actress Genevieve. John's condition worsened to the point where even Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones once kicked him out of a party because he couldn't take it anymore. But Michelle had her own struggles. The same year she divorced John, the Mamas and the Papas nearly broke up. Cass Elliot wanted to pursue a solo career, and new musical trends left the group behind. the band slowly faded away before finally terminating their recording contract in 1969. John and Michelle were no longer together, and neither was their band. After the fallout of her marriage and her music career, Michelle decided to take a new path: acting. The world of cinema, with its bright spotlights and glittering stars, quickly swept her away. During her first days of nervous auditions, Michelle had a brief affair with a young, promising actor at the time, Jack Nicholson. Jack's recklessness, daring, and a little crazy seemed to awaken in Michelle instincts that had long been buried in the shadow of John Phillips. She tried her hand at various roles, and then, as fate would have it, Michelle landed the leading role in her last film, a daring counterculture film by Dennis Hopper, who had just shaken Hollywood with his masterpiece Easy Rider. When she signed on, Michelle must have been well aware of Hopper's illustrious and infamous reputation. He was a true rebel, a legendary wild child with a personality that was both erratic and extreme. But instead of taking that as a warning, Michelle saw something attractive in Hopper. Having lived next door to a volatile rock star like John Phillips, she found Hopper's chaos only made him more intoxicating. To Michelle, he wasn't dangerous. He was an addiction, a wild spirit she wanted to tame. And then, when the crew arrived in Peru to shoot the final film, things got chaotic beyond anyone's imagination. The set was awash with alcohol, drugs, and sudden outbursts, and Hopper was right in the eye of the storm. Instead of keeping her distance, Michelle dove right in. She fell madly in love with him, partly because, as she later admitted, it stemmed from her Florence Nightingale instincts, the urge to save a broken man. But in trying to save Hopper, Michelle nearly lost herself. Soon after filming finished, Michelle and Hopper plunged headlong into a reckless decision. They got married. Their bohemian wedding took place in late 1970 and was strangely simple. Guests recall that paper bags filled with candles were used as decorations, and Hopper himself read the entire wedding ceremony from the Gospel of Thomas as if he were performing some silly play. But the real wake-up call came the next morning. According to multiple witnesses, Hopper was not sober on the wedding day, and when he woke up, he didn't even recognize the bride lying next to him. Music. The days that followed became a nightmare. Hopper, who was obsessed with guns, once opened fire in the house, leaving Michelle and her young daughter paralyzed with horror. Another time, in a drug-induced stupor, he even handcuffed and restrained Michelle, declaring her a witch. That was the moment Michelle realized that if she didn't run away, she would be devoured. The final push came from her own father. He dragged her to the lawyer's office and firmly said, "Men like that never change. File for divorce now." Michelle listened. Her marriage to Dennis Hopper ended abruptly, lasting only 8 days. Having survived both John Phillips and Dennis Hopper, Michelle vowed never to let men like them dictate her life again. She emerged as a Hollywood glamour girl, proudly strutting to lavish parties, rekindling her romance with Jack Nicholson for a year before leaving him for notorious womanizer Warren Beatty. It seemed as if Michelle had regained her luster, and life was once again as bright as the flashing cameras around her. But a dark cloud had begun to quietly gather on the horizon. Michelle remained close to Cass Elliot, her old friend who had conquered the world with her in The Mamas and the Papas. The two shared almost everything and often brought their young daughters to play together. Michelle's daughter, China, was exactly a year younger than Cass's daughter, Owen. But there was one thing Cass had never told anyone about Owen's biological father. In the summer of 1974, while they were sunbathing by the pool, Michelle finally plucked up the courage to ask, Cass just gave a mysterious smile and said, "I'll tell you when I get back from the London show." Cass never got the chance to fulfill that promise. She was exhausted for weeks before the London tour, but she still went on stage and performed as usual. After the show, she called Michelle, crying tears of joy because everything had gone so well. That was the last call they had together. The next night, Cass Elliot, just 32 years old, suddenly died. Despite persistent rumors, the autopsy revealed a heart attack with no traces of drugs in her system. Cass left this world, taking her biggest secret with her and leaving Michelle with an unfillable void.